Hey, my friend, thank you for being here for this second session of the Beyond Resolution series, where we explore conflicts and conflict as a whole and various elements that will help us to go from for sure, for me, what I had been doing for years, and then slowly going a little bit deeper and towards transformation. So we're talking this evening. We're talking about managing conflict, resolving conflict, and then we look into what is possible past the resolution, and if it's relevant to go there every single time we have a conflict. So a quick recap of what we did last session. So if you're watching the replay, thank you for being here. If you're watching live, then we are Wednesday, August 5th. So the first session was on Monday, a couple of days ago. So what we covered on Monday on the first session were a few elements. We did kind of a good exploration, but there was two elements, two concepts or two ideas that I presented that that are relevant for the exploration that we're doing this evening. So the first idea was we explored the question of what is conflict actually. So when we talk about managing, when we talk about resolving, what are we addressing specifically? And we'll see tonight that managing, resolving is not necessarily the same. So when we're addressing conflict, what are we addressing? And we saw that what our clients, what people bring to us, is usually the consequences. It's usually the results or the symptoms of the conflict itself. So if somebody comes to you and say, I have a communication problem with person X, then the communication problem, that's not the conflict. There's something that sits beneath that level, that consequence or that result, what is observable. So there's something that sits underneath that. So it's not like two people met and then there was a conflict of communication. So when there's a miscommunication or a lack of communication, or the communication, there's always something underneath it, and that's what we need to address. That's where the conflict is. If we only address the superficial part, the consequences or the results of that conflict, then obviously, because we're not addressing the conflict, it's going to come back and the results will be dealt with temporarily, but it's not going to last for long. So for the communication example, if there's a breakdown in communication between two people, if we address only the communication level, so we teach the two parties to communicate better and to listen better, it's gonna fix the issue. The issue is gonna go away temporarily, but it's gonna come back in maybe the same way, maybe in another form, if we're not addressing the actual conflict. So that's where we need to be more attentive, that when somebody brings us a result, then we need to look a little bit deeper. And when we address that level down, when we go a little bit deeper, that's what we actually address when we say we're addressing conflict. I also presented the idea that, or the premise, let's say, that conflict is not a problem to solve. We're not fixing anything when we're addressing conflict. Conflict is a signal that something is under that first layer. So what is visible, we need to go a little bit deeper to address the actual conflict, because otherwise it's not going to work. It's not going to be a lasting solution. So conflict is a signal, meaning that when when somebody brings us a situation that there is a conflict with or in it, then we need to look a little bit deeper. We need to be aware that the conflict itself, the results, are signals, they're symptoms of something that's going on a little bit deeper. And the second idea that I presented was about conflict intelligence. So the same thing as emotional intelligence, but for conflicts, the idea that there's an intelligence in reading that conflict, in reading the signal that, somebody brings us a conflict. We see the results of that conflict, and when we have that intelligence, when we develop the conflict intelligence, then we go a little bit deeper, because we know that result, that in that example, the breakdown in communication, that's a signal, not a conflict, that's a signal that something lays a little bit deeper. So with that conflict intelligence, we go a little bit deeper, and we develop the intelligence to really focus on what we need to address, to properly manage, to resolve, and eventually to transform. So those were the two main ideas that we explored on Monday. Conflict as a signal, and when we see that signal, we need to develop, ideally we need to have, so we can develop our conflict intelligence to see that signal and go a little bit deeper to see what is actually going on. Now, session number 2, this is what we're exploring today, is what is resolution? And is there something beyond that? Is it worth it to go beyond resolution? So we'll see if you have your workbook, you don't have to you can follow along in your workbook. There's a quick definition of managing conflict, resolving conflict, and transforming conflict. And as you know, if you've been in the first session, then you know that we're guided to explore through questions. So this evening, this session also, I have a few questions to submit and to see where it leads. And when you read those questions, whatever comes up is usually the answer that you have the answer that you have access to. When whatever comes up is your answer, it's your insight, it's your information to build upon. So I have a few suggestions for those questions, for answers, for paths to explore. But what is really important in those 3 sessions is that you come up with your own answers. That's why the workbook, the downloadable workbook, is a conflict intelligence map. So each session, you're going to build your map, and then you can, by the 3rd session, you'll understand how the map works, and you can reuse the map for any conflict that you come across. So let's jump into the thick of the exploration of today. The first question is the conflict actually resolved or just no longer visible? So that's the difference between managing and resolving a conflict. So I'll give you an example of a problem, or kind of a side-by-side comparison with a problem. So if we think that conflict is a problem to fix, then we're most of the time managing the conflict. So we're gonna see what happens. We're gonna try to understand it as best as we can, and then we're gonna manage it, meaning we're gonna make it go away. Same thing with a problem. If I manage my problems, is that I'm gonna give them priorities, and then I'm gonna address the top ones. And the idea is to fix those problems. So if we see conflict as a problem, then when we deal with conflict, when we manage our conflict, we will want to fix it. So if I take the example of the breakdown in communication, if I'm managing that conflict, it means that I will try to fix the break in communication. So as I gave as an example, I'm going to, teach the two parties or coach the two parties to express themselves better, to listen better, and then it's going to work. The communication will be better, but it's not going to be enough to really address the conflict, to so that situation, that dynamic doesn't show up again. So managing conflict works to a certain level, meaning that when we manage a conflict, it goes away, but it's always temporarily. It always will come back, either the same two people, or two one of the two parties and somebody else. If somebody well, I like to say that in those situations, we cannot resolve conflict. We cannot really address conflict just by coaching or training, or giving a training and then it fixes everything. Oh, sorry. That's my dog that is barking on the side. She's going to be okay. There's somebody in the background. So I'll give her a minute. She's gonna stop. She's gonna calm down. So hopefully you hear me okay while this is happening. Just give me a second. All right, sorry about that. Let's continue. She might bark again, but that's part of having. That's part of the aliveness of the house when we're having when we have a dog. So so when we're managing a conflict, we're going to manage it. It's going to go away, but it's eventually it will come back, because managing a conflict is not to transcend it. It's not to change the dynamic so the conflict doesn't come back. It's really about addressing that first layer, about managing that conflict, making it go away, fixing it, but we're not going deep. So we're just managing on the surface. The second level, so that's why the question is like, is the conflict actually resolved or just no longer visible? When we manage a conflict, it means that we make it go away. We either fix it, even if we know that it's temporarily, and then we just continue to the next conflict. But resolution asks something a little more. So with the resolution, we need to change something so that the same conflict does not come back at a later moment. So it's really that's the main difference, is that managing a conflict, nothing changes. We try to fix it, or we kind of put it on the side. We manage it the best we can. Maybe we separate the two person where the breakdown in communication happened, but nothing essentially is changing. So for the resolution, we need to go a little bit deeper and actually change something. We address the dynamic. We address what actually caused that conflict. So we go a little bit deeper to hopefully addressing the source of the conflict, so we can we can manage it in a way that it's not gonna recreate itself. So managing a conflict means that we're addressing it, but we're making it go away. We're fixing it. Then a little bit further into the process, we're going to resolve it, meaning we're addressing the dynamics, we're addressing the relationship, we're addressing something a little bit deeper, that by changing it will inevitably change the conflict, and therefore change the results that we've been that are visual, that we can see. So that's the resolution bit. But then, is there an opportunity to go even further? Like, is resolution enough by itself, or is there an opportunity to go deeper, to go farther? So first, in the first session, we explored how conflict is a signal. And then with conflict intelligence, we can read that signal and go to the proper depth to address the cause of the conflict. What if conflict could be an agent, maybe not an agent, a signal for transformation? So that's where we're going with this second question, is that what would it look like for this conflict to deepen the relationship instead of interrupting it? So what would it look like for this conflict to actually have an impact on the relationship, to that when even when once we resolve that conflict, if we go to another level and we use the conflict, we use that situation, we use the fact that those two people are coming together to resolve a conflict, to actually transform not just the conflict, but also the parties, to transform the relationship, to transform the dynamic between those two parties. When we do that, when we transcend and when we transform, when we seize that opportunity, which is the conflict, to address something much deeper, then that's when transformation happens. And that's when, in the first session, I was talking about the magic that happens when you're either in a mediation, and at some point one of the two parties opens up, somebody opens up, and then it leads to a completely different level of discussion. The moment deepens and people are much more connected. So that's really where we want to go with the transformation. Now, is transformation necessary every single time? Is resolution enough in some of the situations that we're dealing with? Of course, transformation is not necessary every single time. It's an opportunity, it's an invitation to lean in, to come to guide people into going deeper. Now, is that the point every single time? Probably not. But we have the opportunity with small conflicts, big conflicts, recurring conflicts. When the conflict has really two parties that are really entrenched in their positions, there is an opportunity to transform it. So every time we're dealing with a new conflict, we have the opportunity either to manage it, to fix it, to make it go away, knowing that it's going to come back. We can resolve it, so address the actual conflict that created those results that we're seeing, or we also have the opportunity to transform it, so transcend the situation, and use the conflict to transform, to access deeper levels, to transform the whole situation, and in the same time to transform the two people, the two parties or more that are directly involved in the conflict. So that raises another question. Management and resolution of conflict, they can be designed. So it's most of us, I say all of us are trained to apply processes to find the best process for the conflict, for the situation, and then guide people through this process. And it's the same for management. It's the same for resolution. And it's also the same for transformation, but there's something different with the transformation. The transformation cannot be planned. So the resolution, let's say a mediation process, when you guide parties through that process, at one point the parties will know what to expect. You're guiding, you're doing your part, and everything is flowing well. The communication is open, and you have, at one point, like I was sharing in session number one, you have a moment where you feel that you could, like, this, at this level, at that moment, resolution could be enough, or you have the opportunity to go a little bit deeper. I was giving the example in session one of when I realized that a few years ago in the mediation that I was leading, and it was an employee with a director, and then they came together, and then at some point, the mediation went really well. And at some point, there was a hesitation from both parties and from myself in thinking, like, this is enough, this is okay, but there's something that's not quite sticking. And we ended the mediation. Well, obviously nobody said anything. We ended the mediation, the two parties shook hands, and it was good. On paper, it was a successful mediation. A few weeks later, the two parties came back. The agreement that they had in the mediation did not hold, and then we started exploring a little bit deeper. And each of the two parties and myself, we expressed that we felt at one point that there was something more to explore, but because nobody brought it up during the mediation, then it did not happen. So that's what we did. We went a little bit further, and we were able to address the dynamics, the relationship between the two person. And it started with an imbalance in power dynamics, and then it was there was a racialized aspect to it, and like there was quite a bit of layers. But once we went through all those layers, that's when, like, even more of the magic happened. Everything clicked, and both parties were transformed by that exploration, that extra exploration, where we went a little bit deeper. Well, much deeper on that second exploration. But the resolution was okay. On paper, the mediation was a success, so we could have left it at that. But then life made it happen that both parties came back, and we worked on something a little bit different. So resolution is designed, it's an analyzing the situation and fitting the right process, or supporting the resolution with the right process, and then guiding our parties through those processes. And transformation is the invitation. So it's not necessary, it's not a mandatory, but it's the invitation to use the conflict to transcend the situation, and for each party and the practitioner too, to be transformed by what comes out of that exploration. So I hope that makes sense. But we'll see we're going to jump in the workbook now. But the idea right now, it's to understand that managing a conflict is not the same as resolving. And for each conflict, with the signal that there's something going on deeper, if we choose to access those deeper levels through conflict intelligence, then the transformation aspect of conflict is accessible to us. Now, that like we just explored, is transformation mandatory every time? Probably not, but it's an opportunity, it's an invitation. But it cannot be designed, it's not an approach where kind of cookie cutter approach, that when we have this type of conflict, then it can transform in this way and with that process. So that's why we need conflict intelligence. That's why we develop the sensitivity and the delicateness of our approach to be able to read that conflict and know how to explore those deeper layers to help both parties to be transformed by the whole process, by that exploration. And most of the time, it also affects us as practitioners, where we get transformed, we get touched, we get transformed by that exploration too. So, all right. Now, we're going to jump into the workbook. What I suggest is that you have kind of do it mentally in your head for now. If you want to take some notes, that's more than okay. But I would invite you to go do the exercises after this live or this video if you're watching the replays, or stop it if you're just pause it and do a little bit of the exercise and then come back to the video, and so on and so forth, because it's worth those questions in the workbook, and the questions, the next 3 questions that I'm going to present are worth sitting with. So it's not something that is super quick to come up with answers. You give yourself some time to reflect, give yourself some time to sit with those questions, and the more you sit with those questions, and the more you open up to whatever comes up for you to have your own answers, then the better the results that you're going to get from completing that conflict intelligence map. So that's when with this question, that's how we engage more with the workbook. So where does your current approach to this conflict sit? Managing, resolving, or somewhere else? So this conflict, you can use the conflict that you brought up, that you explored a little bit in session 1, or you can use a completely different conflict. And there's also a little note. I'll bring up the book here. So in session 2, you'll see after the little diagram of managing, resolving, and transforming, then you choose a situation that you're dealing with, either personally, that you're one of the parties, or that you're helping parties deal with. So you explain a little bit in details what the situation is. You don't have to go super deep in details. The details are important when you start the deeper exploration, but you can just take a few notes on which conflict you're going to choose for the exploration. Then you confirm, are you a party in this conflict, or are you a professional or somebody that is helping others work through this conflict? And then that question on the screen, where does your current approach to this conflict sit? Are you trying to manage this conflict? Are you trying to resolve it? Or is there something else that you're trying to do with that conflict? Are you managing the situation, meaning we fix it and we make it go away? Are you resolving the conflict, meaning that you're addressing the deeper layer, not just what's on the surface, but the deeper layer, the actual conflict, the cause of the result that you're seeing? Are you addressing the dynamic between the two people? Are you trying to change that dynamic, that relationship, so the exact same conflict will not come back again? Or is it something else that you're experiencing with that conflict? So that's the question to populate in your workbook. As I shared, maybe now, maybe later. That's up to you. But now we're going to explore a little more about building that conflict intelligence map. So in session number 3, we'll use a framework to build around the conflict intelligence map. But for now, it's the main questions are for you to sit with and see, like, be as honest as you can be. Some of those questions are, the answers might not be super pleasant, but the more honest you are, the more authentic you are in your exploration, the better your results will be. So keep in mind, nobody needs to see those answers. Those answers are for you. The workbook is a journal, let's say, for your exploration. So I don't need to see those answers. Nobody else needs to see those answers. So go a little more honest and authentic that you would in a regular training. And the deeper you go within yourself for those answers, the better the results you're going to get from this exploration. So with the conflict that you chose, what has been tried and why has it not worked? So if you're still dealing with that conflict, it means something did not work. Because if it worked, then you would not be dealing with that conflict anymore, obviously. So what have you tried specifically, the actions that you took to address that conflict, whether it's managing, resolving, or something else? What have you tried exactly, specifically, to address that conflict? And in your honest opinion, or in your the way you see that conflict, that situation, why has what you did, why hasn't it worked? Why did this why is the conflict still going, or if the conflict came back? So if we take the example of the breakdown in communication, then what the clients bring to us is the breakdown of communication. So we have an opportunity, or we have a choice to make. We either manage the breakdown in communication, trying to fix it. We can go a little bit deeper and try to understand why is there a communication breakdown. And when we do that, then we're in resolving mode, because we want to resolve the cause of the breakdown, so the breakdown does not happen again. With that perspective, what did you try, and why didn't it work anyway, something like that. So if I'm managing and I'm addressing the breakdown in communication, maybe I will try coaching. I'm going to coach both parties in expressing themselves better and listening better, and then we're going to bring them together and they're going to practice, and then that's going to be it. That's managing the conflict, the situation, the result, the visual result of the conflict went away. The communication is reestablished. We can put that aside and move forward. So if the conflict came back, it obviously did, because you're still dealing with it. So why has that not worked? Why has the coaching not worked in that situation? So was it because, maybe it was not the right approach? Maybe the parties were not really engaged in it. Maybe they just, said what they needed to say to move on, and that's it. Maybe one of the parties expected the other party to do something different, and then they didn't, so they broke their commitment, or whatever happened, whatever you did, and why it did not work. If you're in the resolution perspective, and you said, okay, like, maybe let's explore a little bit deeper than the breakdown in communication. Why did it happen? And maybe the process will be a facilitated discussion. So you have your facilitated discussion in the section, like, what have you tried? facilitated discussion, preparation for the discussion, maybe some coaching, and then I brought the two parties together, and the communication, the conversation went well. But a couple of months later, the two people are back in my office and they're dealing with the same issue. So why hasn't it worked? Why has the facilitated discussion did not work for that specific situation? Maybe because the two parties were not really engaged. They were not sincere in what they were saying. Maybe the situation was addressed, the dynamic changed a little bit, but the triggers that created the conflict, and then that ended up in a breakdown of communication, maybe the triggers were still there. So when the facilitated discussion went well, but when they went back to reality, the triggers still got to them, and then they went right back into the breakdown of communication. So whatever happened, that it made what you did, the actions that you took, the process that you applied, not working, then those are the elements that you're evaluating, that you're bringing up. So what did you do, and why did it not work? And it's not about thinking, the solution, or I should have done something different, or this or that. It's just bringing up the information to help your awareness in saying, like, I tried this is the situation, I tried this, it didn't work because of that. So then there's something else, there's a next level where we can go to explore that a little more fully. And that opportunity, that invitation, is in the next two questions will lead us to that aspect, which we will explore in session number 3 to complete the conflict intelligence map. But right now, the idea is that there's something deeper than the actual conflict, because we thought what we did was resolving that conflict, the source of that conflict, and we applied processes to address that source, thinking that it will work. But because the conflict is still there, then those processes, that approach did not work. So it means that there's something even deeper than resolving the conflict. And how do we get there? Where are we looking to go deeper? Is for the self-protection, I'd say, mechanism or instinct of the two parties. So that's where this question comes in. What might each person in this conflict be protecting? I'll take a sip of water and I'll be back. So, what might each person in this conflict be protecting? If your process did not, if your attempts or your actions did not fix the problem, and then because conflict is not a problem, of course, and then your process did not resolve the issue, it means that there's something deeper. 99% of the time, it's because the two parties did not go deep enough in their own exploration, and something is still triggering them. Something is still scary for them. They're still acting in fear, whether it's conscious or not. Most of the time it's unconscious. There's something, there are elements in each party that prevent them from going deeper into that conversation. And 99% of the time, it's self-protective. It's a reflex that I'm going to shut down because we're going to talk about emotional stuff and I don't want to go there. So I'm going to kind of manage the conversation in a way that we don't go where I'm afraid to go. So I'm gonna either, put up walls or barriers or shut down in communication when we go there. So if that's where I'm giving that as an example, if that's where the parties are the most vulnerable, then resolution that does not address that level will not work. It will not last. It's going to last more than fixing the problem, but it's not going to last. It's not going to be sustainable because the triggers are still there. So that's the invitation of the transformation of conflict, using the conflict as a signal that there's something deeper, that if it is not explored, the two options without the deeper exploration, the two options are managing it or resolving the situation, resolving the issue, knowing that if there is still something remaining a little bit deeper, the situation, the issue, the conflict will eventually come back. Maybe not the same, because with resolution, we're kind of changing the dynamic a little bit, but the triggers are still there. And sooner or later, if the two parties are still in contact, sooner or later, it's going to be brought up probably in a different way. So what might each person in this conflict be protecting? And that's where it's just a hypothetical at this moment. We're going to explore what could be triggering that self-protective reflex in session number 3. Right now, for the conflict that you're exploring, answer the question in the book is a prompt. Let me bring this up. So you have the section about building the map. So what I can see on the surface, the presenting issue, so the result, the consequences, the symptoms of the conflict. What has been tried? So how did I try to deal with that situation? Why hasn't it worked? So what has not worked and why hasn't it worked? And then when we go a little bit deeper in the section, what I sense is underneath, below the surface, what this conflict might be about beneath what is visible and what each person may be protecting. So we go like slowly, we go down in those layers with conflict intelligence, to develop our conflict intelligence, to understand what is underneath all of this. You might have seen the two, like it's the visual of the two icebergs in that are very popular in conflict resolution, where people are really positional, and then ideally you want to get them into their interests and then into their values by finding common grounds and going deeper into those that exploration. And it's the same idea. So if we stay at the top, where we see what the conflict is about, and how it shows up on a daily basis, so like the breakdown in communication example, and we don't go deeper, we're just managing. When we go a little bit deeper and we try to understand why the conflict is happening, that's resolution. If we find it exactly why the conflict is happening, then we can start shifting the relationship, the dynamic between the two parties, so that that specific conflict does not come back. It might come back into something else, a different dynamic because the triggers are still there. We haven't addressed the triggers yet. So if we go a little bit deeper with the situation that you're dealing with, think about it and note some examples, some ideas of what could be triggering those parties. And if it's you that is in a conflict, that you're one of the parties, then ask yourself the question, what am I protecting myself from? Where is it that I don't want to go in that dynamic, in that situation? And you will see there are various levels for that exploration. We'll see in the session number 3. But right now, to be aware that when resolution does not work, it's because there's something deeper to explore. Somebody, usually both parties, are self-protecting. They're protecting themselves from something. And if we choose to accept the invitation to address those levels where people are self-protecting, that's when conflict becomes an opportunity of transformation for the parties and also for the practitioner that is or the professional that is helping those parties to have that transformation. And then finally, to kind of bring it all together and to end this session in preparation for session number 3. Last question that I'm going to leave you to explore, to kind of ponder on for the next couple of days. So what would need to be true for transformation to be possible here? So in the situation that you're dealing with, that you're helping others or you're dealing with yourself, what would need to be true for transformation to be possible here? So the main, the bigger idea, let's say, is that we need to address the layers below the conflict, the layers within, to be able to address those triggers, those maybe some of the beliefs. We're going to work with the values. We're going to work most of the time. There's always a link to an identity. When people are self-protecting, they're defending some part of their identity that I cannot. It would be usually unconscious. It would be like suicide to agree with the person in front of me. Like, I cannot do that. That would go against my whole identity. So when we're at that level, of course, managing a conflict, the management of a conflict will not work. The resolution will not work either. We need to go deeper to be able to have access to an opportunity to transform the situation, the conflict, and the parties. Well, I guess to transcend the conflict and transform the parties, we need to go explore in those deeper levels. So the reflection piece for you today is really about taking note that there is something beyond resolution. Whether resolution works or not, there's always the opportunity, the invitation to go a little bit deeper, to transcend the conflict and actually use the conflict as a source of transformation for the parties. And most of the time, it affects us too as practitioners and professionals. So what would need to be true for transformation to be possible in the conflict that you chose to explore with the conflict intelligence map? I'm going to leave you with that note. As always, if you have any questions, any comments, you can put them in the comment section, and that's how we can communicate. If it's something more personal that you don't want to be public, you can send me an email personally, directly, and we can respond to that. if you are registered in the Beyond the Resolution series, so you're getting the reminders, the emails about the series, you can reply to any of those emails, and I will be happy to support you and help you out as I can. But really, it's about doing the exercises. It's about leaning into the work, opening up to the possibility that there might be something after, like past resolution, when we go deeper, when we accept the invitation to explore a possible transformation. How we do that, that is on in the session number 3 coming up this Friday. If you're watching the replay, then it's the next video, session number 3 on the Beyond Resolution series. So I'll leave you with that open-ended question. What needs to be true in your conflict, in your situation, that by being true gives you access to that invitation to transformation? Thank you for your participation. Thank you for your comments. I receive comments, through emails or through various channels. Thank you for those, and I am looking forward to seeing you again in session number 3, where we're going to explore what is actually transformation. How do we use conflict to transform a situation? And what is the path to go deeper into those triggers, into those values, identities, space, emotions? How do we get there through a process, through a framework that cannot be planned, but it can be step by step in exploring a little bit deeper, so we can guide our parties to have that exploration, and at the same time being transformed by that same exploration. So that's what we're going to do in session number 3, live on Friday, August 7 at 7 p.m. Eastern time. And if you're watching this on the replay, then it's the 3rd video of the series. You can jump right into it. Thank you for being here. Thank you for doing the work. Thank you for being on this path. I always say that we need more people that are better with conflict, to help us, all of us, deal with conflict in a much more humane human way, and to build relationships, to use conflicts as opportunities to build relationships, instead of simply managing the moment or trying to slightly shift dynamics. There's always the opportunity to build, to recreate and build relationships when we're dealing with conflict. That's what we're going to explore on session 3. I will see you then. Take good care of yourself, my friend. Namaste.